back to the Always Reading Book Club. It is your girl Kiki Reader, and we're diving back into our series with the second and last book in this series. If you have not already listened to the first book in this series, which is The Endgame, that link is going to be down in the description section below. And then once you finish with that, you can come and join us as we jump into Playing by Heart. Lisa is now in Port Huron, which is actually one of the places that she visited with her grandparents when she was younger. And she hadn't meant to stay there that long, but she loved it so much, it just started to feel like home for her, so she just stayed. She works at a pub as a waitress, and she also has joined a co-op for artists, which sell their art on Sundays at like a flea market, something like that. She has made some friends, and she's just living like a quaint little happy life. So Lisa had walked off for like a few minutes from the stand where they're selling their artwork, and when she came back, her friend Katya was like, hey, a guy came by and was looking at your work, and he was like, he thought he maybe had seen your work before. So she started to freak out, Lisa did, because she's thinking, no one knows my work, like Mark does. So then she asked Katya, like, can you like describe him? And she's like, oh yeah, he was older, he had gray hair. And then she calmed down a little bit because she knew that wasn't Mark. But then before they left the market, she did look, and she thought she saw someone who had like the profile of Mark, but when they turned their head fully, she could see it wasn't him. So Martha, who is the person that owns the pub that Lisa works in, we get a little backstory on her. So apparently she used to be married to like this really abusive man, and she could clearly see that Lisa was in trouble when Lisa came to town, and she just wanted to help her, and she just kind of took her up under her wing, and they've been close ever since. Lisa has put on some weight, as Martha is a great cook. She goes out with Ellie, who is Martha's daughter. She is like in town on break from college, and some other friends, and they have like a really great night. Ellie wanted to hook her up with the guy, but after a look from her mother was kind of looking at her like, girl, no, she's not in the place. She finally understood, and she kind of left it alone. Plus Lisa had said, I'm not looking for anything, and so she backed off. So she has a dream of someone bamming on her door. So she goes to the door, and it's Grayson, but he doesn't look like himself. He looks mad, and he's saying things to her like, you owe me and I've come to collect. So she tells him, I'm going to pay you back with interest, but I just don't have all of your money right now. And he's like, I don't want the money. I want what I paid for, which is your body. Get on your knees. And the same way Mark used to make her do, grabbing her head, making her gag on his dick, that's what Grayson does in the dream. And he's speaking to her like she's this thing. So when he goes down on her, he like bites her, which is a thing like Mark used to do as well, to make her feel pain. Then he tells her, I got a surprise for you. And he goes to the door, and it's Mark. And Mark starts taking his clothes off, and that's when old girl screams, waking up like thrashing around in the bed. The next week, she had a hard time sleeping, and because she's pretty much terrified of having that nightmare again. So by that Friday, old girl is ready for like an early night in. She was about to leave when she sees Grayson outside of the pub. So she goes to him, and she's thinking about that dream still. And she tells him, I know why you're here. I'll pay you back. And he's like, I'm not here about the money. That wasn't that much to me anyways. And she kept insisting, well, then you must want what you paid for. We can go to your hotel if you'd like. And he was like, no, I don't want to do that for money. And so then he compromised and said, just give me a game of chess. And she was like, that's too much money for a game. And he said, well, throw in dinner. And she said, okay, but it'll have to be a home cooked meal. And he was like, that's even better. So they go to her place. She makes dinner. I think it's like spaghetti and meatballs. And he makes the salad. They have a little light convo. He asked her, if it was okay for him to come and see her. And she said, of course. And then he says to her, are you worried about the fact that if I found you, it would be easy for Mark to find you too? And she was like, yeah, I am kind of worried about that. And he was like, it was just a coincidence. He was like, my father saw your painting and remembered the painting in my home. So it was Grayson's dad that had been inquiring about that painting. So she made some coffee for him, and then they set up a game. She set up a game of chess. So she beat him at chess, and while they were playing, she apologized again for leaving in a hurry, but told him, it was the only time that she could leave Mark. And he, of course, was like, why didn't you just tell me? I would have given you the money to leave him. And she was like, I couldn't do that because then I'm now in debt to you, so I needed to earn it. So after the game, he asked if he could see her before he left on Sunday evening, and she was like, she couldn't. He looked sad, but he respected it. And he told her, she could always call him. And she was like, well, I don't have your number. I got rid of that other phone while I was in London. So she went and got her phone, and he put in his contact information. And then he kissed her on the forehead, and he left. So then about 20 minutes later, she cleaned up and everything. And the whole time she's going back and forth in her mind, like, what am I doing? I don't want him to leave. So she texted him, please come back now. So he did. And he was like, why did you tell me to leave? And she was like, I just needed to know that you would really leave if I asked you to, as well as know that I could let you go. And so she apologized and said that she didn't mean to play games, but she had to be sure. He, of course, kisses her and tells her that if she ever tells him to leave, he will always oblige. And here's the thing. She's a broken person, right? So you can expect her to try and, do those type of things because she is still very much stuck in what happened to her. It's only been like about maybe 6 months. So it's pretty fresh, So they start kissing, and he feels that something's wrong. And she, of course, was like, nothing. But he, of course, he can feel it. And she tells him, the thoughts that are like circling her head. She's afraid that because she has put on weight, she'll hear him say what he said to her in her dreams. And he, of course, was like, I want you no matter what. And he, of course, proved it to her, started eating her pussy, and then they had a nice magical fuck. The next morning, she wakes up feeling an arm on her possessively, and she jumps up. So she automatically feels like it's Mark, because that's how he used to, wake up wanting to be completely attached to her, and it was just suffocating. So, of course, Grayson's like, what's wrong? She tells him, she isn't used to having someone in her bed, and it freaked her out. And Grayson automatically knew that she thought it was Mark, and he understood. So then she takes him to her studio, which is her landlord let her uses it as long as she keeps it cleared out. So it's like, I guess, like the attic where in her building, because underneath her building, underneath her apartment is a bakery. So she lives on top of a bakery. So it makes for great smells. He, of course, loves her work, but doesn't like the local stuff she does for the tours. He was honest with her. He was like, this doesn't really look like your style. But she was like, it pays good, so I do it. But she still is working on, the normal artwork that she loves to do. So they're going to spend the day together surfing, and then they're going to go have dinner and stay the night with his parents, who don't live too far from Port Huron. So they go surfing, have a great time, get a bite to eat, and then they go to the parents' house. It was a great dinner. They had good conversation. The parents were glad about him getting back in touch with Lisa because it meant that they might be able to see Grayson more often, since she lives this way. So Lisa told her about herself, but of course, she left out the Mark stuff because it's embarrassing to her. Lisa was tired, so Grayson sent her upstairs to go ahead and get some rest, and he stayed and helped his mom clean up. And while they were cleaning up, his mother asked him, she said to him, you really care about her, don't you? And he, of course, was like, yes. And the mother was like, that makes me happy, but there are some issues with her. She reminds me of patients I have with PTSD. And Grayson tells her, she was involved in a bad relationship back in London. And the mother says, well, you know what? At least she has you. So Janet, she's retired now, but she is a psychotherapist. And the father, I think his name was Don, he is a barrister, a.k.a. lawyer. So he goes upstairs, and Lisa's looking out at, the wonderful view. And then he starts, fingering her until she comes. And then they spend the night making love over and over again. The next morning, he tells her, he's sad, he has to leave later that day because he has meetings the next day in London. And she's like, I understand. But he tells her, I want to see you again. And she was like, that might not be a good idea. And he was like, why? We both like each other and enjoy spending time together. And she brought up the distance, and he was like, I will go to the end of the earth for you. I was like, ooh, that is beautiful. She eventually decides to try, and, he was like, this is going to work. Now, in my opinion, when he asked her this, I feel like he shouldn't have had to keep trying to convince her that it was a good idea. She's still very broken. And so I would have, as much as I love Grace's character, I really do. If he said it to her, hey, I want to try, and she says no, hey, maybe we'll revisit another day. I wouldn't have kept pressing. But I digress. So she goes through the next week, anticipating, of course, seeing Grayson, because this is going to become the whole thing of him coming down on Fridays, leaving on Sundays. So she gets invited to play a game at the pub and a concert with her friends, but she was like, no, we're just going to stay in and enjoy each other. So she was worried that her friends would be upset. But to me, if you and a guy just now are reconnecting, and this is only the second time he's coming into town, I don't feel like they should be tripping. You know what I mean? Like, I'm reconnecting with someone. Give me a couple of weeks. You know what I mean? Don't trip. Give me a couple of weeks. So they had a great time. She spent a lot of money on like steaks and wine. She just wanted to make it like super special for him. He, of course, was like, you ain't got to spend all your money on me. And she's like, no, I just wanted to. So while they were eating, he told her that he had talked to Isabel and she saw Mark, and apparently he has a new girlfriend named Rose. And Grayson, of course, wanted to know, how she felt about it. And she was like, I'm not jealous, but I feel a little guilty because she doesn't know what she's walking into. And Grayson said, maybe he'll treat her differently. And she was like, yeah, let's hope. So they ate, played chess, made love all weekend. And it has already started where they aren't really ready to let each other go when that Sunday evening comes. The distance is getting to them already. And it's only been like week 2. So weeks go by. She has the same setup each week. Well, now her friends are really like, okay, when are we going to meet him? And she was like, well, we'll see, what he has planned. So Martha starts thinking that it was the guy that she was, in the bad relationship with. And I could see how she thinks that because it seems like she's being isolated, but she's the one that's doing it. But it's like she's kind of put it on him because she's like, oh, I don't know what he has plans for. I don't know what he wants to do. So she's automatically reacting like she's in a relationship with Mark. Again, broken person. And she's making stuff more difficult than what it needs to be. But she's broken. You can't expect a healthy type of a situation with a broken person. So on this particular weekend, she tells Grayson, oh, I haven't gotten a lot of painting done. Let me use Friday as a time to get caught up. And then you just come down on, Saturday. Whole time she's doing that, she tells him that so that, she can have a girls' night out that Friday. Again, Grayson has not given you any type of indication that you need to lie to him about spending time with your friends. But she is stuck. She is treating this as if this is the same relationship that she has with Mark. So when he does come in on Saturday, he's like, why don't you ever want to just show me around where you live, And she's like, well, there's not much to see. He's like, I don't care, but this is where you spend your time. Like, can we walk around this, the city or something? So they're walking around and they run into Katia, and she spills all the beans. She talks about last night with the drinks and the Mexican food, dinner at Martha's. And she even invited him to, she's like, I know this might not be your type of music, but, my boyfriend has a gig tonight, if you guys want to come. So when she leaves, Grayson's thinking, he asks her, he's looking, because he's making these crazy looking faces, but trying to keep it together. And he asked Lisa, are you seeing someone else? Because her whole demeanor changed, like, throughout that conversation. And he's thinking like, okay, either you're doing something, or he's like, are you embarrassed of me? And her reaction was just like, oh my gosh. She's like, no, it's nothing like that. She was like, no, they just had said that I hadn't been spending time with them and I felt bad. And so I didn't want you to feel bad and, think that I was, wanting you not to come and things like that. So and then she realizes what she was doing. She was separating her friends and her relationship because that is what she had known with Mark. And so because the last time she had to get rid of her old friends, she didn't want to lose these friends, so she just automatically separated them. So then she invites him to her. That was another thing. The following week is going to be her birthday party. And Grayson didn't know anything about it because she hadn't said anything. So after that whole debacle, she was like, no, please come. I want you there. So the next weekend,